over far 1,400 years ago, an event unfolded that would irrevocably alter the course of history. A solitary merchant, devoid of an army or wealth, proclaimed a message that would evolve into a force powerful enough to shake entire empires. This was a voice that promised the existence of only one God and asserted that all people stood equal before him. What began in this humble setting would expand within mere decades across 3 continents, stretching from the Indus River to the Atlantic Ocean and from the Sahara Desert to Central Asia. New empires emerged, cultures flourished, and the realms of science and art reached unprecedented heights. Simultaneously, conflicts ignited, challenging and shaping communities in profound ways. This is the story of Islam, a narrative woven with threads of revelation and faith, power and ascendance, periods of prosperity and severe trials. So, settle in comfortably in your bed and join me on this journey through centuries, beginning from the early nights in Mecca and extending to the present day. We also invite you to share in the comments where you are watching this video from and what time it is in your location. We are continually amazed by the diverse places our viewers come from. Chapter 1: Arabia before Islam. Before the advent of Islam, Arabia existed as a world between worlds. It was a land nestled at the heart of 3 great civilizations. To the west lay the empires of Egypt and the Mediterranean, to the east Persia and Mesopotamia, and to the north Byzantium. Yet, the peninsula itself remained largely untouched for centuries, characterized by vast deserts, rugged mountains, and scattered oases that appeared like verdant islands amid an endless sea of sand. Life in this challenging environment was harsh. Those who sought to thrive in this landscape had to learn to make do with very little. The Bedouins, the nomadic tribes of the desert, guided their herds of camels, goats, and sheep across the arid terrain. Their animals served as sources of sustenance, means of transportation, and the very foundation of their existence. A single camel represented survival. It provided milk, meat, hide, and functioned as a pack animal along the lengthy caravan routes. The people lived in tents made from black goat hair, which offered shelter from the sun during the day and protection against the biting cold of night. Life was filled with deprivation, yet it also held its own sense of pride. Those who endured the trials of the desert demonstrated strength, and this strength was closely tied to the honor of their tribe. Society was governed by tribal affiliations. Every individual belonged to a tribe, and each tribe acted as a shield against the perils of the wilderness. The honor of the tribe was valued above the life of any single person. An insult could ignite a blood feud that would last for generations. However, there were also firm rules that applied to all. Hospitality, for instance, was sacred. Even an enemy was allowed to seek refuge in a stranger's tent and was required to be treated like a brother for a specified period. This custom was crucial for survival in a land where a stranger without assistance would have faced death within just a few days. The cities of Arabia resembled islands amidst vast expanses of desert. Among them, Mecca held a particularly significant role. Positioned along the caravan routes that connected the southern regions of Arabia with Syria and Mesopotamia, it became a bustling hub of trade. Merchants brought incense and myrrh from Yemen, spices and silk from India, as well as textiles and glassware from Byzantium. However, Mecca was more than just a market, it was also a sacred site. At the heart of the city stood the Kaaba, a cube-shaped sanctuary whose origins were traced back to the stories of Abraham. Yet, prior to the advent of Islam, it was surrounded by statues and images of various deities. Each prominent tribal community had its idol there, and once a year pilgrims from all corners of Arabia would gather to perform sacred rites. During these times, even tribal conflict ceased, as the Kaaba was regarded as a sacred sanctuary. Religiously, Arabia was a mosaic of beliefs. Many people worshipped ancient tribal gods, deities associated with the sun, moon, rain, or fertility. However, other religions also found a foothold. In the northern and southern regions, there were Christian communities, and in cities like Yathrib, which would later be known as Medina, Jewish tribes resided. Some individuals rejected polytheism and sought a higher purpose. These seekers were known as Hanifs, individuals yearning for a single true God, even if they had not yet committed to a formal religion. Thus, Arabia was by no means isolated. It was actively engaged in exchanges with the outside world. Through the caravan routes, not only goods flowed, but also ideas, stories, and influences. In the bustling cities, tales circulated about the emperors of Byzantium, the kings of Persia, and the wars that these empires waged against one another. Yet, in the desert itself, the tribal order and the struggle for survival remained the dominant forces. Language played a vital role during this period. The Arabs were masters of poetry, and lengthy, intricately recited verses could elevate a tribe's glory or bring it to ruin. Poets served as the keepers of memory, the chroniclers of their peoples. Their verses celebrated bravery in battle, loyalty to the community, as well as the beauty of love, nature, and hospitality. In a culture where few could write, the words of poets became living treasures, passed down from one mouth to another. This was the world in which Islam was born, a land rich in contrasts, marked by poverty and wealth, by ancient customs and the first whispers of new ideas. It was a world deeply rooted in tribal traditions, yet simultaneously open to external influences. In this blend of tradition and change, between oases and caravan routes, between idols and a longing for something greater, the groundwork was subtly being laid for a message that would soon transform everything. Chapter 2: The Life of the Prophet Muhammad. In the heart of the Arabian desert, in the sacred city of Mecca, a child was born around the year 570, a name that would later resonate across the globe: Muhammad, the son of Abdullah and Amina. This year is remembered in Mecca as the Year of the Elephant, for it was during this time that an army, equipped with war elephants, attempted to conquer the city and the revered Kaaba. However, the assault failed, and the people interpreted this as a sign that their sanctuary was under divine protection. Muhammad grew up without his father, as Abdullah had passed away before his birth. His mother, Amina, cared for him for only a few brief years before she too succumbed to death. Thus, the young boy was orphaned at an early age, navigating a world where tribal affiliation determined life and death. This precarious situation could have spelled doom for him, but his grandfather, Abdul Muttalib, took him in. Eventually, Abdul Muttalib entrusted him to the care of his uncle, Abu Talib, who raised Muhammad as if he were his own son. From a young age, Muhammad experienced the vulnerability of relying on others for support, an experience that perhaps shaped his character for the entirety of his life. His formative years were marked by simplicity. Like many boys of his era, he initially tended to sheep before embarking on journeys with caravans. These travels took him to Syria and the northern cities, where he encountered foreign languages, met Christian monks, and began to understand life beyond the borders of Arabia. Renowned for his reliability and honesty, he earned the nickname Al-Amin, meaning the trustworthy. His commendable reputation led him to become a business partner to a wealthy widow named Khadija. She entrusted him with her trading caravans, and he managed them with remarkable skill and prudence. Impressed by his integrity and character, Khadija ultimately took him as her husband. That time, Muhammad was approximately 25 years old, while she was significantly older. Nevertheless, their marriage was described as harmonious and fulfilling. For many years, Khadija was not only his companion but also the confidant of his fears and aspirations. Muhammad led a quiet life as a merchant and family man, yet an inner restlessness began to grow within him. Time and again he sought solitude, retreating to the mountains surrounding Mecca. Particularly the cave of Hira, located not far from the city, became his sanctuary. There he spent nights in prayer and contemplation, gazing at the starry sky, pondering existence, justice, and the nature of God. Around the year 610, when he was about 40 years old, something profound occurred in that cave, an event destined to alter his life and the course of world history. According to historical accounts, an angel named Gabriel appeared to him one night. Muhammad received words that he did not articulate himself, but were instead revealed to him. Recite in the name of your Lord who created. This marked the beginning of the revelation that would later form the Quran. Initially, Muhammad was shaken by this experience, grappling with self-doubt and uncertainty. Muhammad feared that his experiences might simply be a figment of his imagination. However, his wife Khadija provided him with much-needed support and reassurance. She sought the counsel of a learned relative who confirmed that Muhammad's experience was consistent with what earlier prophets had encountered. From that moment onward, Muhammad began to publicly proclaim his message: there is only one God, Allah, and all people are equal before him. Yet, the inhabitants of Mecca responded to his message with skepticism. They took great pride in the Kaaba, adorned with numerous idols that attracted pilgrims from various tribes. The new teachings not only threatened their established religious customs, but also jeopardized the economic foundation of the city. Those who ceased to worship idols would no longer travel in throngs to Mecca, and the merchants feared for the survival of their businesses. Thus, resistance began to mount. Muhammad and his initial followers faced ridicule, ostracism, and persecution. Nevertheless, the community gradually expanded. People from all walks of life found solace in his message. The impoverished, who were hearing about equality for the first time, women who were promised dignity and rights, and men who sensed his sincerity began to rally around him. However, the opposition from the wealthy families became so fierce that Muhammad's followers were forced to leave their homeland temporarily and sought refuge in Ethiopia. When Muhammad's own life was ultimately threatened, he made the decision to emigrate. In the year 622, he left Mecca with his followers and journeyed to Yathrib, a city that would later be known as Medina, the city of the Prophet. This momentous event, known as the Hijra, is regarded to this day as the beginning of the Islamic calendar. In Medina, Muhammad not only established a community of faith, but also created a society governed by law and order. He emerged as a religious leader, judge, and statesman all at once. Treaties were forged, conflicts were resolved, and rules for coexistence were established. Islam transformed from merely a message into a lived community. However, the conflict with Mecca was far from over. There were continual skirmishes, battles, and confrontations. Despite setbacks, Muhammad's movement gained increasing strength. After years of struggle, he eventually returned to Mecca with his followers. The city surrendered. The Kaaba was cleansed of its idols and was thereafter dedicated solely to the worship of Allah. In the final years of his life, Muhammad focused on solidifying the foundations of the new faith. He delivered sermons, addressed legal and religious matters, and witnessed the evolution of a small community into a movement that transcended Arabia. In the year 630, he passed away in Medina in the home of his wife Aisha. He left behind no gold, no treasures, and no empire in the conventional sense. Only his message, the words of the Quran, and a community of believers who would carry forth his legacy. Thus, the life of Muhammad came to an end, yet with his passing, the true history of Islam was only just beginning. The question of who should inherit Muhammad's legacy created a rift within the community. At the same time, the fledgling religion faced the daunting task of establishing its place in the world. Chapter 3: The Era of the Rightly Guided Caliphs, spanning from the year 632 to 636. When Muhammad passed away in Medina in the year 632, profound grief enveloped his followers. Many of his companions found it unimaginable that the prophet who had led and taught them was no longer among them. Some even initially refused to accept his death. However, Abu Bakr, one of Muhammad's closest friends, stepped forward to address the people, uttering words that brought clarity to the situation. He declared, "Whoever has served Muhammad should know that Muhammad is dead. But whoever has served Allah should know that Allah lives and does not die." With these words, the focus shifted from the person of the Prophet to God and the community of believers. The pressing question arose, who would lead this young community of believers? Muhammad had not designated a successor, so the leaders of the community decided that Abu Bakr, the loyal companion of the Prophet, would assume the role of the first caliph, a successor in the worldly sense. His reign lasted only 2 years, yet during this brief period, he ensured the unity of the community. Following Muhammad's death, several tribes attempted to break away from Medina and pursue their own paths. However, Abu Bakr resolutely waged wars against these secessions, known as the Ridda Wars. In doing so, he preserved the unity of the nascent Islam and laid the groundwork for its expansion. After him, Umar ibn al-Khattab succeeded to leadership. Under his rule, the history of Islam took a dramatic turn. In just a few years, the boundaries of the new community expanded far beyond the Arabian Peninsula. Umar's forces advanced into Syria, Egypt, and Persia. The vast empires of the Byzantines and Sassanids were weakened by internal conflicts, allowing city after city, region after region to fall under Muslim control. Damascus was conquered, Jerusalem was taken, and even Alexandria, the grand city by the Mediterranean Sea, came under Muslim authority. Yet Umar was not merely a conqueror, he also established the foundations of an administration that transcended tribal life. New provinces were created, a tax system was instituted, and he ensured that the conquered peoples were not oppressed in their religions. Christians and Jews were recognized as people of the book and were granted the right to continue practicing their faiths, albeit with the obligation to pay a special tax. In this way, a system emerged that promised both tolerance and order. Following Umar's death, Uthman ibn Affan ascended to power. He ruled for 12 years, during which the empire expanded even further. Under his leadership, a standardized version of the Quran was compiled for the first time. Until then, the revelations had circulated in various forms. However, Uthman commissioned a definitive version of the Quran to be compiled and disseminated. This action ensured the unity of the message for future generations. Nevertheless, his reign was also marked by tensions. Many Muslims accused him of favoring relatives and members of his own tribe. Discontent grew, and eventually Uthman was assassinated by rebels in Medina, an event that left deep scars within the community. Following his death, Ali ibn Abi Talib, the cousin and son-in-law of Muhammad, was appointed as the caliph. Ali was regarded as pious, brave, and just, yet his rule was contested from the very beginning. The internal strife within the community became openly apparent. Particularly, the governor of Syria, Muawiyah, opposed him and demanded retribution for Uthman's murder. This led to confrontations, and the young Muslim community experienced its first civil wars. During this tumultuous period, the first divisions emerged. Some viewed Ali as the rightful leader, while others questioned his authority. From this time, the roots of the schism that persists today between Sunnis and Shiites began to take shape. Ali ruled amid these conflicts, but he too met a violent end. In the year 666, he was assassinated by an attacker. With Ali's death, the era of the rightly guided caliphs came to an end. These 3 decades following the Prophet's death were a time of rapid change. From a small community in Medina, a vast empire had emerged, stretching from Egypt to Persia. However, the community had also suffered internal fractures that would never fully heal. The memories of Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, and Ali remained vivid, and their reigns were later idealized as models of leadership. Yet, the history of Islam continued, and with the rise of the Umayyads, the empire would undergo a complete transformation once again. Chapter 4. The Umayyad dynasty from 666 to 750. With Ali's death in the year 666, the era of the rightly guided caliphs concluded, ushering in a new period. Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan, the governor of Syria and a member of the powerful Umayyad tribe, rose to prominence. With him, the center of power shifted. The capital was moved from Medina to Damascus. There, in the fertile region of Syria, the first great dynasty of Islamic history, the Umayyads, began their reign. Under their rule, Islam transformed from a religious community into a vast world empire. Within a few decades, the Umayyads expanded their dominion in all directions. In the west, they crossed North Africa, conquered Carthage, and continued into Spain. In the year 711, Muslim troops crossed the Strait of Gibraltar and established a new rule that would become known in Europe as Al-Andalus. To the east, the Umayyads pushed beyond Persia into Central Asia, reaching the borders of India and China. Never before had Islam spread so extensively. However, this rapid rise brought with it significant tensions. The empire was vast and diverse, and the people who now lived under Muslim rule were not limited to Arabs, Persians, Syrians, and Copts. Berbers also formed part of this expansive realm, each bringing their own languages, traditions, and religions into the fold. While Christians and Jews were granted the protected status of people of the book, many felt marginalized by the Arabs, who had now become the ruling elite. Access to the highest offices was predominantly reserved for those of Arab descent, and even newly converted Muslims often found themselves relegated to a lower social standing. Despite these underlying tensions, the empire experienced a period of stability and order. In Damascus, magnificent structures began to emerge, among which was the Grand Umayyad Mosque, a site that remains one of the most significant sanctuaries in the Islamic world to this day. Administrative and financial systems were organized more effectively, and Arabic became the standardized language of governance throughout the empire. Coins, which had previously bore Greek or Persian inscriptions, were now minted with Arabic script, serving as a visible testament to the rise of a new cultural identity. Yet, beneath the surface, discontent was brewing. Many Muslims perceived the Umayyads as being overly worldly. They were accused of treating the caliphate not as a religious mandate, but rather as a hereditary monarchy. This dissatisfaction was particularly pronounced among the supporters of Ali, who believed that only his descendants had the rightful claim to leadership. From this faction, the Shiite branch of Islam emerged, establishing a permanent distinction from the Sunni majority. Even among the ordinary believers, unrest simmered. Some movements arose with the aim of restoring the original purity of the community that had existed during Muhammad's time. Additionally, there was pressure from newly converted Muslims who demanded full equality within the society. This atmosphere of unrest gradually weakened the Umayyad rule. The significant turning point came in the year 75. In Persia and Iraq, a movement emerged centered around the Abbasid family, descendants of an uncle of the Prophet Muhammad. They capitalized on the widespread dissatisfaction among various peoples and groups to overthrow the Umayyads. In a decisive battle by the river, the Umayyads were defeated, and nearly their entire family was exterminated in the process. Only one prince, Abd al-Rahman, managed to escape. He fled across North Africa to Spain, where he established his own ruling dynasty, the Emirate of Córdoba, which would later flourish in its own right. With the Abbasid victory, the era of the Umayyads came to an end in the east. Nevertheless, the Umayyads had indelibly shaped the face of the Islamic world. What had begun as a tribal community evolved into a vast empire that spanned from Spain to India. They had made Arabic the language of administration, culture, and religion, laying the groundwork for the future development of the Islamic civilization. Despite all the criticism they faced, the Abbasid dynasty left a legacy that would shape the coming centuries. Chapter 5. The Abbasid Dynasty from the year 750 to the year 1258. Following the fall of the Umayyads, a new era began. The Abbasids, descendants of an uncle of the Prophet Muhammad, rose to power. They relocated the capital to Baghdad, a city that would soon become one of the largest and most magnificent centers of the world. Baghdad was more than just the capital. It was established as a circular city, featuring palaces and mosques at its heart, surrounded by residential neighborhoods, bustling markets, and lush gardens. Before long, it emerged as a gathering place for merchants from all corners of the globe, including India, Persia, Byzantium, and even China. The air in the bazaars was filled with the enticing aromas of spices, incense, and freshly traded coffee. In the workshops, exquisite fabrics, fine glassware, and magnificent carpets were crafted. However, Baghdad was not solely a hub of commerce. It also became the epicenter of a new golden age of science and culture. The caliphs, particularly Harun al-Rashid, who later became immortalized in the tales of 1001 Nights, and his son al-Ma'mun, actively supported scholars from various parts of the world. In the renowned House of Wisdom, a grand library and translation school, works from Greek, Syriac, Persian, and Sanskrit were translated into Arabic. The knowledge of Aristotle, Hippocrates, Galen, Indian mathematicians, and Persian astronomers converged and was further developed. Here, the foundations of modern algebra were laid, along with star charts and medical texts that Europe would later adopt. Physicians like Ibn Sina, known in Europe as Avicenna, authored works that remained standards for centuries. Musicians and poets performed their verses in the courtyards. Women played significant roles in this society, even if they often remained in the background. They emerged as poets, scholars, or influential figures at the court of the caliphs. The Abbasid Empire was vast, yet it proved challenging to govern. Within just a few generations, it began to fragment. Local rulers gained influence, and new dynasties arose in North Africa. In Spain, the Umayyads established their own realm. Nevertheless, Baghdad remained a spiritual and cultural center for a long time, its influence reaching far beyond the borders of the caliphate itself. However, over the centuries, the power of the Abbasids weakened. Internal strife, uprisings, and rivalries rendered their rule unstable. Foreign mercenaries, initially brought in as support, gradually gained more power and influence. And finally, new external threats emerged, including the Seljuks, the Crusaders, and ultimately the Mongols. In the year 1258, this catastrophe reached its zenith. The Mongol army stood at the gates of Baghdad, a city that had once been the heart of the Islamic world, now facing devastation after bloody battles. Libraries were consumed by flames, and palaces were reduced to ruins. Tens of thousands lost their lives in this tragic event. With this occurrence, the magnificent era of the Abbasids in Baghdad came to a tragic end, although a weakened remnant of the caliphate would later continue in Cairo. The Abbasids left behind a monumental legacy. They had transformed the message of Islam into a world culture that influenced not only the Middle East but also Europe and Asia. They preserved the knowledge of antiquity, further developed it, and passed it on to future generations. They created cities whose brilliance continues to resonate in stories to this day. Chapter 6: Islam in Europe, Al-Andalus, and Sicily. While Baghdad flourished in the east, Islam began to take deep root in Europe as well. This was especially true in Spain, which was known in the Islamic world as Al-Andalus. In the year 711, a group of Muslim Berbers and Arabs crossed the Strait of Gibraltar. They were led by Tariq ibn Ziyad, whose name lives on in Jabal Tariq, the mountain of Tariq in Gibraltar. Within just a few years, the Visigothic kingdom that dominated Spain at the time disintegrated, and large parts of the Iberian Peninsula came under Muslim rule. Al-Andalus quickly became a land of encounters. The new rulers brought their language, culture, and religion, yet they coexisted alongside Christians and Jews. This diversity made the region one of the most vibrant spaces of the Middle Ages. Cities such as Córdoba, Toledo, and Granada thrived. Córdoba, in particular, emerged as the center of scholarship that rivaled Baghdad. It was home to hundreds of thousands of people, more than most cities in Europe at the time. The streets were paved and illuminated at night, while many cities in the rest of Europe remained shrouded in darkness. There were libraries containing hundreds of thousands of books, whereas in some northern monasteries, barely a dozen manuscripts were preserved. Physicians treated their patients with methods based on the knowledge of Galen and Hippocrates, but these practices had been further developed. Mathematicians worked with a new numeral system that had traveled from India to the West, laying the foundation for algebra and modern calculations. The architecture of Al-Andalus was unique. The Great Mosque of Cordoba, with its red and white horseshoe arches, remains a symbol of this era to this day. Later, in Granada, the Alhambra was constructed, a palace complex of such beauty that it is still among the most renowned architectural marvels in Europe. Art and craftsmanship flourished, characterized by magnificent mosaics, exquisite calligraphy, and intricate gardens that defined the cultural landscape. However, Al-Andalus was not merely a place of Muslim culture. It was a land where the coexistence of Muslims, Christians, and Jews took on a unique form. Scholars from all three religions collaborated, translating texts and exchanging knowledge in a remarkable display of intellectual synergy. Many works of Greek philosophers which had been forgotten in Europe found their way back to the West through translations made in Al-Andalus. Without this crucial mediation, significant parts of the European Renaissance would have been nearly inconceivable. In addition to Spain, Sicily played an important role in this cultural exchange. After coming under Muslim rule in the 9th century, the island blossomed into a vital center for trade and culture within the Mediterranean. Arab scholars introduced new knowledge in agriculture and astronomy, leaving a lasting impact that persisted even after the Normans reconquered the island. Yet, Al-Andalus was not free from conflict. Time and again, Christian kingdoms in the north of Spain rose up against Muslim rule. For centuries, the so-called Reconquista unfolded, a prolonged campaign of gradual reconquest that ultimately culminated in the year 1492 with the fall of Granada. Even after the end of Muslim governance, the legacy of Al-Andalus remained vibrant. Its influence can be seen in architecture, language, sciences, and in the collective memory of a time when Europe and Islam were more closely intertwined than is often recognized today. Chapter 7: Crusades and the Mongol Invasion, up to the 13th century. Following centuries of flourishing, the Islamic empires faced new challenges. In both the West and the East, formidable forces were advancing, shaking the very balance of the world. In the year 1095, Pope Urban I issued a call for the First Crusade from far-off Clermont in France. Christendom was urged to reclaim Jerusalem, the Holy City, from Muslim hands. This call struck a chord in the hearts of many. Thousands of knights, peasants, and adventurers set out, driven by fervent faith, the hope for riches, and the promise of forgiveness. For the Islamic world, this onslaught was a shocking event. Jerusalem, a city sacred to Muslims as well, fell into the hands of the Crusaders. A massacre ensued, described in the chronicles of that era as unprecedented in its brutality. Upon the ruins of the city, the Crusaders established the Kingdom of Jerusalem and other states along the coast of the eastern Mediterranean. Nevertheless, the Islamic world was not idle. Over the ensuing decades, leaders emerged who organized resistance against the invaders. One of the most renowned was Salah ad-Din, known in Europe as Saladin. He united Egypt and Syria under his rule and dealt a crushing blow to the Crusaders at the Battle of Hattin in the year 1187. Shortly thereafter, he entered Jerusalem, but unlike the Crusaders, he spared the civilian population. From that point on, the city remained predominantly under Muslim control, even though the Crusaders continued to hold out in various coastal cities for several more centuries. The Crusades were far more than just a series of battles. They represented a significant exchange between two distinct worlds. European knights, venturing into the cities of the East, encountered new architectural styles, advanced medical practices, and exotic trade goods. Conversely, the Crusaders introduced Western influences into the Near East. This contact was often brutal and marked by violence, yet it also facilitated the movement of knowledge, ideas, and techniques across vast distances. While the Crusades raged in the West, an even greater threat emerged in the East: the Mongols. In the 13th century, they surged forth like a tidal wave from the steppes of Central Asia. Under the leadership of Genghis Khan and his successors, they rapidly conquered vast territories stretching from China to Eastern Europe. The Islamic world was not spared from this devastating onslaught. City after city fell, with Bukhara, Samarkand, and Baghdad, places that had long been celebrated as centers of culture and scholarship, suffering catastrophic destruction. The fall of Baghdad in the year 1958 remains particularly etched in the annals of history. The Mongols captured the city, resulting in the deaths of tens of thousands, and the Grand Library, containing countless manuscripts, was consumed by flames or submerged in the waters of the Tigris River. For many Muslims, it felt as though an entire world was collapsing. However, this catastrophe also led to unforeseen developments. The Mongols, who initially appeared as mere destroyers, gradually began to integrate into the cultures of the lands they had conquered. Some of them even converted to Islam, later becoming patrons of the very religion they once fought against. The era of the Crusades and the Mongol invasions marked a time of severe trials for the Islamic world. Cities were obliterated, empires crumbled, yet the culture of Islam managed to endure these substantial blows. New centers of power emerged, new dynasties rose to prominence, and history continued its course toward the rise of a new great power that would soon take center stage on the world stage: the Ottoman Empire. Chapter 8: The Ottoman Empire from the 14th to the 20th century. Following the upheavals caused by the Crusaders and the Mongols, a new power arose from Anatolia that would influence the fate of the Islamic world for centuries to come: the Ottoman Empire. Its origins were modest. Around the turn of the century, a tribal leader named Osman commanded a small community of warriors at the frontier of the Byzantine Empire. Yet from this small tribe, an empire would grow within a few generations, encompassing 3 continents. The Ottomans skillfully leveraged their strategic position between Asia and Europe, expanding their territory step by step. Soon they faced a monumental task: the conquest of Constantinople, the ancient capital of the Byzantine Empire. For centuries, many peoples had unsuccessfully attempted to capture this city, which was fortified by formidable walls. However, in the year Aynen, Sultan Mehmed, who would later become known as the Conqueror, achieved this monumental feat. With cannons that hurled massive projectiles against the ancient walls, Sultan Mehmed breached the millennia-old fortifications of the city. Constantinople fell, and the city was bestowed with a new name: Istanbul. This significant victory transformed the Ottoman Empire into a great power that would shape the Mediterranean and the Near East. The empire expanded rapidly. In the east, it reached deep into Arabia and beyond Persia, while in the south, it extended to North Africa, and in the west, it encompassed the Balkans, Hungary, Greece, and Serbia. All these regions came under Ottoman rule. During the 16th and 17th centuries, the Sultan's troops stood at the gates of Vienna, and all of Europe trembled before the might of this new empire. However, the Ottomans were not merely warriors. They established a sophisticated administration that brought order and stability. Provinces were organized, taxes were collected, and an army of elite soldiers known as janissaries formed the backbone of the military. The Janissaries were originally Christian boys from the provinces who were conscripted into the Sultan's service. They were educated in Islam, underwent military training, and became one of the most formidable fighting forces of their time. The Ottoman Empire also emerged as a cultural center. Under Sultan Suleiman, who was referred to as the Magnificent, it reached its zenith. During his reign, magnificent structures such as the splendid Süleymaniye Mosque in Istanbul were constructed. Poets, scholars, and artists found a home at the Sultan's court. Trade flourished, with caravans bringing goods from India and Arabia, while ships sailed across the Mediterranean and the Black Sea. For the people within the empire, the Ottoman state represented an authority that united many nations and religions under its roof. Christians, Jews, and Muslims lived side by side, each within their respective communities, yet all were part of the same state. This system, known as the millet, allowed various religious groups to largely manage their own affairs, provided they acknowledged the Sultan's supremacy. However, the power of the Ottomans was not to remain unchallenged forever. Beginning in the 17th century, the borders began to waver. Defeats against European powers weakened the empire. New trade routes across the Atlantic bypassed the Mediterranean, diminishing the economic influence of the Ottomans. Increasingly, regions began to break away from Ottoman control, while the sultans in Istanbul attempted to implement reforms to modernize the empire. By the 19th century, the Ottoman Empire was referred to in Europe as the sick man of Europe. National movements shook the provinces, and great powers like England, France, Russia, and later Germany intervened in its politics. The empire sought renewal, but time seemed to slip away. Ultimately, the First World War brought about its demise. The Ottomans allied with Germany and Austria, but following their defeat, their empire disintegrated. In the year 1924, the Sultanate was abolished, marking the end of a significant era. From the remnants of the once mighty Ottoman Empire emerged the modern Republic of Turkey, led by Mustafa Kemal, who would later be known as Atatürk. This transition signified the conclusion of an epoch that had profoundly influenced the Islamic world and large portions of Europe for nearly 600 years. The Ottoman Empire was a vast entity that united diverse peoples, religions, and cultures under one roof. It was characterized by its magnificent cities, military conquests, and a flourishing of science, art, and trade. The legacy of the Ottomans endures to this day, reflected in the architectural marvels, languages, and stories that recount this rich historical period. Chapter 9: Other Islamic Empires, the Safavids and the Mughal Empire. While the Ottomans rose to prominence in the West, other Islamic realms were emerging in different regions, leaving their own indelible marks on history. Notable among these were the Safavid dynasty in Persia and the Mughal Empire in India. The Safavids emerged in the early 16th century in Persia, founded by Shah Ismail, who adeptly united various tribes and warriors under his banner. Under his rule, Persia transformed into a Shiite empire, consciously distinguishing itself from the Sunni Ottoman Empire. This pivotal decision has had lasting implications for the region. Today, Iran, the ancient Persia, remains a center of Shiite Islam. The Safavids developed their capital, Isfahan, into one of the most beautiful cities of the time. Wide boulevards, magnificent mosques adorned with shimmering blue domes, and intricately designed palaces made Isfahan a hub of art and architecture. Merchants from across the globe flocked to this vibrant city, where Persian carpets, exquisite fabrics, and ornate ceramics found their way to distant markets in Europe and China. However, the Safavid dynasty was in a constant state of tension with the Ottomans. Numerous wars erupted between the two empires, and the border between Anatolia and Persia remained a contentious issue for centuries. Despite these conflicts, a unique culture flourished in Persia, characterized by poetry, painting, and a distinct mysticism that continues to influence the Islamic tradition in that region. Meanwhile, further east in India, the Mughal Empire was taking shape during the same period. Its founder, Babur, a descendant of Timur and Genghis Khan, migrated from Central Asia to India, where he achieved a decisive victory at the Battle of Panipat. This triumph ushered in an era that would profoundly reshape India. Although the Mughals were Muslims, they ruled over a land where the majority of the population adhered to Hinduism. The great Mughal emperors, such as Akbar, recognized that their success depended on coexisting with this diversity. Akbar, who reigned in the 16th century, pursued unconventional approaches. He promoted tolerance, sought dialogue with scholars of various religions, and endeavored to create an empire where Muslims and Hindus could coexist harmoniously. Under the Mughals, India experienced a cultural renaissance. They were significant patrons of architecture, and the monuments from this era remain some of the most renowned structures in the world today. The Taj Mahal, constructed by Emperor Shah Jahan as a mausoleum for his beloved wife Mumtaz, stands as one of the most iconic landmarks in the entire Orient. This magnificent structure, with its intricate artistry and stunning architecture, symbolizes the peak of Mughal design and remains a testament to the empire's grandeur. Alongside the Taj Mahal, the fortresses of Agra and Delhi, as well as the lush gardens and grand mosques, further illustrate the opulence of this remarkable empire. Economically, the Mughal Empire was both rich and powerful. India, abundant in cotton, silk, precious gemstones, and spices, became one of the most sought-after trading regions in the world. European powers, including Portugal and later England, France, and the Netherlands, sought to gain influence in this prosperous land. However, the Mughals were not without their internal conflicts. Following the flourishing reigns of notable emperors such as Akbar, Jahangir, Shah Jahan, and Aurangzeb, the empire began to weaken. Factors such as oppressive governance, uprisings, and the growing influence of European nations contributed to the gradual decline of the empire in the 18th century. Ultimately, in the 19th century, the British dismantled Mughal authority, leading India into a period of colonial subjugation. Thus, in both the east and west of the Islamic world, three great empires coexisted: the Ottomans, the Safavids, and the Mughals. Each of these empires had its unique characteristics, whether Sunni, Shia, or a blend of diverse traditions, but they all played significant roles in ensuring that Islam remained a global force during the 16th and 17th centuries. Chapter 10: Islam in Modern Times, 19th to 20th Century. With the onset of modernity, the Islamic world entered a phase of profound upheaval. The centuries of great empires, including the Ottomans, Safavids, and Mughals, had spread Islam across three continents. However, from the 18th and 19th centuries onward, the balance of power began to shift dramatically. Europe, which had long been in a state of relative weakness, experienced a remarkable rise through advancements in science, technology, and the Industrial Revolution, which deeply unsettled the Islamic world. European powers increasingly intervened in the lands of the Orient. In the year 1830, France invaded Algeria, extending its dominion throughout North Africa. England secured control over India, the former Mughal Empire, and established a vast colonial empire there. Egypt also fell under British influence, and even the ancient trade routes in the Middle East became increasingly shaped by European interests. The people in Islamic nations experienced this era as one marked by foreign dominance and humiliation. Entire regions, once centers of power and culture, were reduced to colonies or dependent states. The Ottoman Empire, often referred to as the sick man of Europe, attempted to keep pace with these changes through various reforms. Sultans introduced Western military techniques, constructed railways, and established schools. Yet, the gap between the industrial strength of Europe and the Ottoman Empire remained significant. Concurrently, new movements began to emerge within the Islamic world. Some thinkers advocated for a return to the roots of the faith, seeking a religious renewal that would reinvigorate Islam and restore its former strength. Others, however, sought to connect with modernity, aiming to promote science, technology, and education to catch up with the advancements of the world. In numerous cities, from Cairo to Istanbul and from Tehran to Delhi, intense debates arose regarding the path to take. The developments of the 20th century intensified these discussions. The First World War marked the definitive end of the Ottoman Empire. Following its defeat, the empire crumbled, and its territories were divided among the victorious powers. France and England drew new borders in the Middle East, a legacy that continues to affect the region today. From the remnants of the empire emerged the modern state of Turkey under the leadership of Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, who implemented radical reforms and removed Islam from direct state governance. In other regions, new nation-states emerged, including Iraq, Syria, Egypt, and later Saudi Arabia. Some of these states attempted to intertwine their own interpretations of Islam with national identity, while others leaned more heavily towards Western models. Concurrently, Muslims around the world began to contemplate their shared identity. Pan-Islamic movements called for the overcoming of national divisions in pursuit of a renewed sense of unity. Yet, the reality was far more complex. Colonial interests, economic dependency, and internal conflicts rendered this unity elusive. India, once the seat of the powerful Mughal Empire, also experienced a pivotal transformation. After centuries of British rule, the people fought for their freedom, leading to the partition of India and Pakistan, a new state explicitly founded for Muslims. Later, Bangladesh would also emerge from these tumultuous events. These occurrences highlighted how profoundly the questions of religion and identity shaped political boundaries in the 20th century. Thus, the modern era for the Islamic world was a time of trials. Ancient empires fell apart and new states arose. Colonialism, reforms, struggles for independence, and the quest for a balance between tradition and modernity defined the lives of millions. It was an epoch of transition from the era of caliphs and sultans to the world of nations and modern states. Chapter 11: Islam in the Contemporary World. Today, in the 21st century, Islam stands as one of the largest religions globally. More than 1 billion people, spanning from West Africa to Indonesia and from Bosnia to Kashmir, adhere to this faith. It is no longer confined to the regions of its origin, but has evolved into a truly global phenomenon. The Islamic world is remarkably diverse. Arab countries such as Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and Morocco exhibit significant cultural and historical differences when compared to non-Arab nations like Turkey, Iran, Pakistan, or Indonesia. In Africa south of the Sahara, Central Asia, and the Indian subcontinent, distinct traditions have also developed, further enriching the tapestry of Islamic culture. Everywhere, the belief in one God and the Prophet Muhammad serves as a unifying bond among millions. In numerous countries, Islam profoundly shapes daily life. 5 times each day, the muezzins call the faithful to prayer from the towering minarets, echoing through bustling streets and quiet neighborhoods alike. The holy month of Ramadan is observed with great reverence, marked by fasting, reflection, and community. Each year, the pilgrimage to Mecca, known as the Hajj, draws millions of devout believers from around the globe, all seeking spiritual fulfillment and a sense of unity among their fellow Muslims. However, there exists a vast array of differences in how strictly religious tenets are observed, and the extent to which religion intertwines with politics. In some nations, Islam is the official state religion, while in others it manifests more as a private expression of faith. The contemporary landscape is also marked by significant challenges. The legacy of colonialism has left deep scars, with many borders in the Middle East and Africa drawn by foreign powers, contributing to ongoing tensions and conflicts. In certain regions, the struggles of war, poverty, and political instability have made daily life exceedingly difficult for many individuals. Conversely, other countries, particularly in the Gulf region, have witnessed remarkable economic growth, fueled by oil and gas wealth, leading to pronounced contrasts in living standards. The global perception of Islam is equally characterized by contradictions. On one hand, there is admiration for its rich culture, its monumental architecture, the enchanting music, and the profound contributions of its scholars and poets. On the other hand, recent decades have seen conflicts, terrorist attacks, and political strife that have strained the relationship many hold with Islam. This has often resulted in a distorted image that overlooks the diversity and peaceful nature of the majority of Muslims. Simultaneously, Islam is more integrated into the globalized world than ever before. Millions of Muslims now reside in Europe, North and South America, and Australia. Mosques can be found in cities such as Paris, Berlin, London, and New York, where these communities bring their cultural heritage and beliefs while also adapting to modern societal life. For many young Muslims, it is entirely natural to navigate both worlds, embracing their religious traditions while also engaging with the realities of globalization, the internet, and modern science. Thus, Islam today is not a monolithic entity but rather a vibrant mosaic. It encompasses traditional lifestyles in remote villages as well as cutting-edge universities in Cairo, Tehran, or Jakarta. It thrives in quiet prayers at small mosques, in the joyous celebrations of weddings, and in the splendor of the annual pilgrimage to Mecca. Yet it also faces unresolved questions regarding the relationship between faith and politics, freedom and tradition, and unity and diversity. Today, Islam embodies both a rich heritage of a long history and a dynamic force in the present. A religion that began in the deserts of Arabia can now be found in every corner of the world, upheld by individuals who practice their faith in diverse ways, but are all connected by the same declaration of belief. The history of Islam is not only the tale of one of the great world religions, but also the narrative of the people, cultures, and empires that have shaped the face of the earth over many centuries. It all began in the quiet solitude of the desert, within a cave near Mecca, with a man who received a profound message. From this message emerged a community. From that community arose an empire, and from that empire developed a world civilization, the traces of which remain visible to this day. We have journeyed through the ages, starting with the Bedouin tribes before the advent of Islam, who lived amidst caravans and tribal ties, and moving on to the life of the Prophet Muhammad, who laid the foundation for a new faith with his teachings. We witnessed the era of the first caliphs, during which the empire expanded rapidly, leading to the rise of the Umayyads and Abbasids, who transformed a small community into a vast empire stretching from Spain to India. We entered Al-Andalus, that remarkable Spain where Muslims, Christians, and Jews coexisted side by side, creating a center of scholarship and art. We experienced the Crusades, a time when Christian Europe clashed with the Islamic world in prolonged and bloody conflicts, as well as the Mongol invasions that reduced entire cities to rubble, yet failed to silence Islam. We moved into the era of the Ottomans, who captured Constantinople and ruled for centuries over an empire that connected Europe and Asia. We also encountered the Safavids in Persia and the Mughals in India, who shaped Islam in their own unique ways through grand cities, rich culture, and architecture that still inspires admiration today. We have seen how the Islamic world faced pressures during the modern era, as colonial powers dominated entire nations and new nation-states emerged. Finally, we arrive at the present, where Islam stands as a world religion with over 1 billion adherents across all continents, diverse, vibrant, yet challenged by the questions of the modern world. Thus, the history of Islam is one of peaks and valleys, of rise and fall, of wars and encounters, of faith and culture. It is the story of people who lived in the deserts of Arabia, in the palaces of Baghdad, in the mosques of Cordoba, in the fortresses of Delhi, and in the bazaars of Istanbul. This is a story that remains unfinished, for even today, just as for over 1400 years, Muslims around the globe turn their prayers toward Mecca, reciting the same words that Muhammad once received, feeling a connection to a community that transcends any nation. Our journey concludes here, but the story continues.